Okay, I'm going to try this again. I don't know where it's recording to, but hopefully somewhere. So I have a presentation and I'll launch right into that. Excuse me. And hopefully, if you have questions about a particular slide, feel free to interrupt me, and Margot is going to watch the chat for comments. But if it's a general question or comment, let's wait till the end. That way I can get through the presentation and we can have a straight discussion. So hopefully I will be able to share my screen all right. Can somebody acknowledge that they can see that? Great.
Yep. Yep.
All right, I'm hoping you see the presentation mode.
Yep.
So we already covered that. So this is the update of the Basin 12 plan, which is the Deerfield River and the lower Connecticut tributaries. When we create these plans, we're trying to answer a bunch of questions. So we're looking at what the water quality is and what the habitat conditions are right now, so we can see where we have been and where we're headed. What needs to be done to improve the condition of both of those, the water quality and the habitat. We want to look at our management goals, and what I mean by that is what we use our waters for. We have water classifications, and we want to make sure that the water quality meets the uses that people want to make of our waters, and those are our management goals. We want to figure out what strategies we need to implement to improve those conditions and make sure we've got problems solved over time. And who do we work with? All our partners. As Margot mentioned, we've got a lot of partners in this region that we work with to implement, and we're always looking for new partners to team up with to get all this work done in the watershed. These plans are basically done on a 5-year rotation. And what we do is we start off with water quality monitoring. The team goes out and they monitor our rivers and lakes and wetlands. And then we take that data and analyze it, figure out what it's telling us. And that's when I tend to step in and start drafting a basin plan. And I've been working on this one for a little while now. And what I'm here for is to hear from you what I need to put in the plan. You know, I'll go through what information we have about the conditions and where I've started. But you all have more local knowledge of the rivers and streams and lakes and ponds around you. So I could really use that local information so I can make this plan something that's really usable by all of us. This is the time frame for it. This is actually the last kickoff meeting I'm doing. I've been meeting with smaller groups over the past fall to put some of this together. I'm hoping to have a review for our partners on January, well, we'll say February. I don't think I'm going to make it by the end of the month. But hopefully I'll have the plan drafted after that over a few months and come back to public meetings to let everybody see it, review it, and tell me whether or not I got it right, with the goal of it being done by June. And that's a very ambitious goal, I know, but that's what I'm shooting for. So this is what we're talking about. The Deerfield River is a bi-state watershed. So it's, you know, it's got this large part in Vermont and another significant part in Massachusetts. The Deerfield River itself runs from way at the top straight down and crosses the Mass line, and then the whole thing comes out in Greenfield, Mass. The Deerfield has this part here, which is the South Branch. It's got the West Branch. It's got the East Branch and the North Branch. All of those are straight Deerfield. This watershed here is the East Branch of the North River. And this one is the Green River. So if you're any part of those watersheds, you're all in the Deerfield River watershed. The Whetstone Brook, Broad Brook, the Fall River, Town Brook, Newton Brook, those all run directly into the Connecticut River. So we add those in, and then this plan also covers this short stretch of the Connecticut River main stem. So everything from the mouth of the West River to the Mass line is what I'm going to have in this. And from the land cover map there, you can see that, you know, this watershed is very, very heavily forested, which is a great thing because that's the most protective land cover for water quality protection. The red areas are the developed lands, and obviously, you know, around Brattleboro makes sense. And then around the ski areas where we have the heaviest development in the watershed. But there's not a whole lot other than that. This is what it looks like when we do our biological assessment. We do physical, chemical, and biological monitoring, but we weigh the biological monitoring really heavily. And what I mean by that, are the bugs and the fish. So the bugs that live in the bottom of the stream are really telling of water quality. So up here, you can see that the macroinvertebrate monitoring sites are the circles. The fish monitoring sites are the ovals. And the scale runs from green to red. So the greener the scale, the better the water quality. The darker red scale, the not so great water quality. But you can see that for the most part, we're from good to excellent for most of the macroinvertebrate sites. We've got some dark reds here on the fish end of things. A lot of that is due to these are smaller headwater streams that are very cold and not terribly productive for fish. But we also have some lakes and streams in this region that are impacted by acid rain, and that also lowers the productivity. So we've got all that going on. And we also have the North Branch, which we monitor much more heavily because of all the ski area development. A lot of them, all of them are under permits that we have to monitor, make sure they're in permit compliance. So we have a lot more data on the North Branch. Excuse me, and you can see that there's somewhat more yellow and in the mid-range of that scale for this watershed. So we are working with the resorts to work on water quality. We also monitor our lakes and ponds, and this is a different scale. It goes from blue to red. And we monitor for really track 4 different things. We track the nutrient trend, whether the nutrients are rising, staying constant, or falling. We're looking at the shoreline and the lake habitat. We're looking at invasive species. And we also look at that atmospheric deposition. Along with acid rain comes mercury that flows in here on the air currents from the Midwest power plants. Things are getting better, but we do still have these impaired areas in our lakes. I'll leave it at that. We've also started more recently monitoring our wetlands, and this is a scale again from red to green. And we don't have as many of these monitored. We've only been doing it for 5 or 6 years now. And unlike the other 2 sets of monitoring, this isn't like a random set. So this isn't like representative of all our water, our wetlands. Because when we're monitoring right now, we're targeting things that we think might have an issue that we might want to restore, or we're targeting things that we think are in really great shape that we want to make sure stay that way and are protected. So this gives you a small sample of what our wetlands are looking like so far, which is good. There's only a couple of red dots there. But it's not a random sample. We do have the good end of the scale in this watershed. So as I mentioned, we have classes of water. We have A1, B1, and B2 waters. A1s are our most natural, highest water quality conditions. And all that light purple area is already classified as A1 waters. We worked with the Forest Service a number of years ago to reclassify those because they're in great shape, and Forest Service does their job in keeping them in that condition. With all the monitoring data that we do have, we're also looking at other waters in the basin that we are pretty sure are meeting the criteria for A1 and B1. For all you anglers out there, I haven't incorporated the fish data yet. I haven't gotten that. That'll come as I develop the plan. But these waters, the dark blue number 2 down there in the South Branch and the lighter blues already meet the water quality criteria for those classes. We just need to confirm that with yet another set of sampling. So the waters in this watershed are in pretty good condition, which is really encouraging. But there is, of course, the other end of the spectrum, and we do have waters that are not meeting the Vermont water quality standards. These are those waters. The list that you can see up here tells you what they are. We have impairments due to bacteria. We have them due to nutrients and sediment. We have one due to too much iron in the brook, and we have a number that are due to flow and altered hydrology, which I think I added. Nope, I didn't. So the Connecticut River is actually included in this, in that because it's hydrologically altered because of the hydroelectric dams. So we have those waters as well. And part of the basin plan, one of the requirements that we have is to address impaired waters in the strategies and actions that we take. One of the bigger things that we are working on is the Long Island Sound dissolved oxygen / nitrogen total maximum daily load. And if you hear about the Lake Champlain Basin working on phosphorus, we have the very same issue, but just a different nutrient that we need to address, and that's nitrogen on this side of the state. And what the nitrogen in the water causes is large dead zones in Long Island Sound that have no dissolved oxygen, and therefore they can't support life. So in this one, it's where that dead zone was in 1994. You can see that it's getting better. It's got some ups and downs, but this is what's remaining. So it has improved over time. There's been a lot of work done, particularly in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and they're focusing now, bringing us into it on the upper watershed to work on it as well. So a lot of the work that the basin plan will point to is going to be to address nitrogen reduction in the entire Connecticut River watershed. And this is what we know, or we think we know, about where that nitrogen is coming from. So as with acid rain, if you remember those discussions 20, 30 years ago, nitrous oxide, sulfuric oxide, again, blowing into the atmosphere, 76% of the nitrogen that is coming from this basin is coming here from atmospheric deposition. There's not much we can do about that. It is encouraging to look at the graphs of nitrogen deposition, that it is decreased significantly over the couple of decades, which is great, but we can't really address that. We can address the other parts. There's only 3% that come from municipal wastewater treatment facilities. 10% is estimated to come from urban land, basically stormwater runoff issues. 7% is estimated to come from septic systems. And I mean, this is a very rural watershed. Most of us are not on or serviced by wastewater treatment plants. So we have some work to do on that. Hopefully we can make some progress on cutting that down. And 5% of it is estimated to come from agricultural lands. When you look at that, and these are estimates, these are modeled data from the US Geological Survey that this data comes from. So when you break that down, and you look at where they think those urban sources are coming from, these, red and orange areas are basically where they think a lot of that urban stormwater runoff is coming from. Makes complete sense. That's where our developed lands are. The septic areas, again, they do coordinate where there is more development, through here, the Brattleboro area, the ski areas. There are also more septic systems in those locations. And then, agricultural is kind of spread out more where we happen to have those limited flatlands in this watershed. That's where a lot of that is estimated to come from. So we'll be focusing on those, help us prioritize where to invest our time and our money. When we develop these strategies, we do it by land use sector, and we have 5 of those, developed lands being one of them. So some of the things that have already come up in conversations is to develop and implement stormwater master plans. We've created these plans for a number of towns in the region. We've already done Brattleboro. We're doing Wilmington. If Margot's there, she can tell me which other ones we've got done. But we have a number of these. And what they do is they really look at the stormwater system in a community and figure out where we could put in treatment practices to address, to infiltrate stormwater or to clean up what's coming off the land. So we want to do more of those and make sure we're well covered. As I mentioned, we have 2 impaired waters due to bacteria. One's in Brattleboro and one is in Dover, so we need to address those. And a couple of things that have been really identified in those stormwater master plans are to address stormwater in this little pond in Brattleboro, and stormwater inputs to the Whetstone Brook, which are heavily impacting those water bodies. And this is just an example of the kind of things that will go into the strategies in the basin plan. Only 3.7% of the basin is in ag lands, and you can see that those light areas are hay pasture land. There's very little cultivated land, mostly in the larger fields, like right along the Connecticut River. So we'll be working with Corey and the Conservation District and other partners to work with the agricultural community to see what projects we can do there. The one area that I really need to focus on is Newton Brook, which is way down in the very southern corner of Vernon. It actually flows into Massachusetts and hits the Connecticut and Massachusetts. That is the only agriculturally impaired stream in my entire region, and certainly in this basin. So we're going to be focusing on that, trying to get some projects done there to improve the condition of Newton Brook. There's, as most people know, significant erosion on the Connecticut River itself, and some work that we could be doing there. A lot of agricultural lands were created out of old wetlands. So are there wetlands that can be restored to improve conditions? And where we have a potential, there's conversation going on about protecting a farm, a large farm that's a major floodplain asset to the town of Wilmington. Forest land covers 82% of the basin, which is fantastic. As I said, that's a most protective land use cover. It keeps our waters as clean as they can be. So it's a significant benefit to the basin and water quality to have that much forest cover. And keeping that land in forest and in active forestry so that it stays there is really important. So we're looking at options for headwater protection. How do we keep those forests intact and serving us for water quality? Doing some outreach on the forest acceptable management practices and on the Skidder Bridge program, which is a rental bridge that loggers can use to cross streams without causing erosion and pollution. And then identifying, it's kind of a new strategy that we're using, is identifying forest roads that need some erosion control, sediment control, reconstruction, and doing those best management installations on those roads. All of the projects that have been identified all across the state are available to look at, review, identify in our watershed projects database. And this is the watershed, the Clean Water Project Explorer. And all of the projects that we have points for will show up on this interactive database, and you can click on any one of these. I opened up a previous version of the PowerPoint, so I keep thinking I've changed it, but this is the older version. So you can click on any one of these dots and it will tell you what that project is. You can zoom in on it and it'll show you exactly where on the landscape it is. And this tab, there's ag projects, there's stormwater projects, there's natural resource, rivers, lakes, ponds, wetland, and there's wastewater projects. So all the different colors indicate what kind of project we're looking at there. And you can see all these, you can read about them, and you can check out whether or not they're on your property. We also list them in a database, the Watershed Projects database. And you can see from these numbers that over the state, we have over 11,000 projects already identified across Vermont. Everything from berm removals, dam removals, aquatic habitat and fisheries project, floodplain restoration projects, bridge projects, buffer plantings, you know, all of these will have water quality benefits to our, whether it's the river, lake, or the stream. And we hope that over time, we can tick these off and get these implemented. And overall, our water quality should improve as we do that. So what I'm looking to do here is learn from you what water quality concerns you have. Where do you see things on the landscape that give you pause, that we should take a look at and consider addressing? Where are the waters that you know are in great shape and you want them to stay that way? We have those protection strategies by reclassifying waters and wetlands to make sure that the things that are in really good shape now stay that way going into the future. Where do we need to do restoration projects? There's a lot of places on the landscape where we can make a difference. And where should we go first? You know, we have over 11,000 projects across the state. We can't do them all. Your input on where we start, what are the most important things to be doing in your community and in this basin, will help me make this plan useful. And that kind of assistance in implementation, whether you're a private landowner or you're on a conservation commission or a watershed group, we are looking to partner with anyone who wants to help. The thing about all these projects is they are completely voluntary. We don't mandate, this is not regulatory. We can only do projects where we have cooperating landowners and interested partners to help us get the projects in place. So that's what we need. And I'm hoping that, you know, getting through this process, coming up with really good projects that target the areas that people are concerned about will help us move to that next step of getting them implemented on the ground. So what do I need to know? So before I stop sharing my screen, I can't see the chat and things like that. So if any questions come up about the slides or about any particular slide, I'm glad to go back. But I can't see any of that right now.
Marie, there's not currently anything in the chat, so
Okay, great. I can always pull it back up if we need to. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see people again. Great.
so if you have any comments or questions, looks like Linda and Steve, Lemke, if you want to go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Marie, it looks like you've identified the unnamed brook that runs from Deer Pond. No, I just forgot the name of it, but up in Halifax down to the Green River as already identified as A1 quality. But I see that Roaring Brook, which is just south of that, is not identified. So how have you identified ones that already qualify? And how does one suggest other ones that we know are?
I'm glad to include any suggestions folks have for this. We base this on the data that we already have collected. And the way we do the monitoring is that the monitoring teams go around the state on a 5-year rotational basis. So the data that we have already collected tells us that these waters are in, at the last monitoring time, which was a couple of years ago, they met the criteria for A1 and B1 waters for aquatic biota. So that's what we are going on for this. As I said, I will include the fisheries, because the fisheries Fish and Wildlife Department gives us those recommendations. So I'll add those in, but what we have is based on data. There are a lot of streams that even in a 5-year rotation, we can't get to every stream in the entire basin. So we have to move those around. And in this case, it could be that we just haven't hit that stream more recently. So one of the tables that I'm going to have in the basin plan is where we need to monitor next. So if you have a suggestion for one that you think would qualify, or that we should know whether or not it qualifies, I can include that in the monitoring table so that the next round of monitoring, they can hit that stream and we can find out what the status actually is.
Yeah, I would suggest that one. It was mapped by Windham Regional several years ago when they did an undeveloped stream study in Windham County.
Yeah.
And you know, it is truly undeveloped, so it would be a good candidate for monitoring.
And what was the name of that one again?
Of Roaring Brook.
Oh, okay.
Which also begins in Halifax and comes down to the Green River by our house.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Marie, it's Steve. I'm going to tag team on Linda's question and just ask you, are you working at all, or do you have participation with any of the conservation groups like Vermont Land Trust and Vermont River Conservancy? I mean, we've had good luck with the Green River Meadows project, and it just seems like starting with people who have conserved land and getting some of those projects worked out is a good place to start on the grassroots or the organic side of things.
I couldn't agree more. Haley, would you like to introduce yourself if you're still out there?
Yeah, thank you so much for the shout out to VRC, Steve. I am attending on behalf of Vermont River Conservancy tonight because, as Marie just alluded and as Steve mentioned, we're one of the partners that does work on river corridor easements and land conservation for the sake of water quality and also so many other natural processes of rivers. So I'm taking notes too on whatever ideas we'll nominate tonight.
Great, thanks, Haley.
So we do have a couple questions, Marie, in the chat. So I'm going to start with the first one from Linda. What is the status of the Green River upgrade to Class A?
Do you want to answer that one? We are working on that.
We are. So we have it. There's been talk for quite a few years of reclassifying the Green River from its current B2 status to A1. And there was a pause last year as we were trying to get some new monitoring data right at the state line. But working now, so Wyndham Regional Commission, working with the Connecticut River Conservancy and Marie, and hopefully members of the Green River Watershed Alliance, we will be working this year on putting together an application and trying to, push that reclassification along. So 2024 is the year. So next question is from Peter. He is wondering what PFOA stands for.
No, I know what it stands for,
Oh.
only too well.
Oh, okay.
It may be beyond the scope of this project, but I have reason to understand a lot about it lately. And it is a very, very serious problem that most governments are denying by omitting bioaccumulation from their analysis. So they'll tell you that the water is perfectly safe, and it's not. And they'll tell you that the fish are fine, and they're way, way, way dangerous. I will stop, but I just wanted to ask if that's any part of the concerns or where one would go with that.
For folks who don't know, I always have to think about the term perfluoro.
Well, it's forever chemicals.
It's a forever chemical. Perfluorooctanoic acid. I have to always think about that.
There's about 6 or 7
Yeah,
different compounds.
there's PFOAs and there's PFAS.
Yeah.
And they are chemicals that we have put into the environment, and they never go away.
They're hormone disruptors and carcinogens, and they're being found to be extremely dangerous.
And they're not addressed in this basin plan. This is mostly surface water quality. And the agency is monitoring PFOAs around the state. They're doing schools, they're doing communities and community drinking water systems. As far as monitoring water quality in our lakes and rivers and streams, that hasn't been done. I did look at where that monitoring has taken place in Vermont, and there has hardly been any in this watershed. So I haven't included it in the plan. I can provide contacts on who to talk to in the state about that. You may already know that. There's a lot of information on the Agency of Natural Resources website, particularly in the drinking water section. If you want to learn more about where that monitoring is happening, and what data they're finding. But it is not being addressed in this basin plan.
And it's really out of scope for you, I understand.
It
But
kind of is.
fish is really, really the big problem now. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great, so I'm going to move to the next question in the chat. Aaron has a 2-part question. And the first part is, are there any new streams or reaches proposed for A1 or B1 designation since the last Tactical Basin Plan?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let me look at my map. I don't know if the Fall River was in there last time. I haven't gone back to really look at the last, review that particular thing. I know the South Branch was in there. The Fall River, if you drive south on 91, as you're going through Vernon, and there's a little tiny stream on the west side of the road, and that's actually the Fall River. And that one is being proposed. The upper end of Ellis Brook, which is kind of cool because the lower end is a mess. But the upper end of Ellis Brook, which is in Dover, right on the Wilmington Dover line, is being proposed. I don't think that was in there, but I think the others probably were. The West Branch, South Branch, Lambrook, Haystack Brook, Blue Brook. In the Green River and the Upper Whetstone. So I think those two have been added, but I think those are the only two. The others are consistent with the last plan. And as Margot said, we haven't been pursuing these reclassifications because of internal agency processes that have been going on, but we have that opportunity now, so we're moving on them.
So the second part to Erin's question is, have any of the previously proposed streams in the last tactical basin plan been upgraded to a higher designation?
That the answer to that is no, because there have been our water quality division, watershed management division has gone through a kind of re-evaluation of water classifications, and that has taken quite a long time. It's of course, you know, a full legislative process. It goes from the scientists to the administration to the legislature and back again, and none of those things move quickly. But we are at the point where we can do it now. So I'm hoping that over this basin plan, we'll make some progress on getting these through.
All right, so another question that comes up from Bob. For lakes and ponds, do you sample sediments?
Not usually. It's not part, I know the lakes and ponds science team does sediment sampling in specific locations, but that's usually related to a specific study that they're doing. I can't think of a lake in this basin that has had sediment sampling. The times that we usually do that, and this might sound odd, but we tend to do that just before we remove a dam on a pond or a lake. And the reason we do that is because we know in that process, those sediments are going to move, and we want to know if there's contaminants in there. So we will often, if there's any chance that some upstream historic industry, construction, whatever, could possibly have contributed contaminated sediment to that, we will look at that, but it's not a normal assessment of our lakes and ponds.
All right, I'm going to take one more from the chat, and then Stephen, you can go right after that. So Edith asks, she has a question about the impaired water side by Tannery Road.
All right.
Edith, can you mention maybe which town Tannery Road is in?
I know which one it's in.
Oh,
It's
okay.
in Wilmington. It's part of the ski area. And as I said,
Actually, it's in Dover. Edie, you're muted.
Yeah, no, I'm here. No, it's a very important place to continue to monitor because there's remediation that Mount Snow is meant to be doing to help that impaired stream. And I just wondered, I'm hoping that you will continue to monitor the water quality there in that impaired stream.
yeah, definitely. I'm pulling it up right now just to make sure I give you the correct information. So the reach, well, wrong place. I want to make sure I hit the right one here. Oh, here it is. I got it. So that is the north branch of the Deerfield River that's running
Right.
through there. And that reach is impaired for temperature. And the reason for that is because of Snow Lake, the snowmaking pond at the resort, holds back water. And that lake is exposed to the sun, the water gets hot, and as it exits the pond, it heats, all that hot water is entering the stream. So the temperatures in that reach below Snow Lake is much warmer than fish tend to like it. So that's why it's impaired. And I'm just making sure that that's the only impairment there.
Well, the original impairment had to do with no macrobiotic biota at all.
Yeah, and that there's also part of it that is stressed for physical alterations of the stream. And the good news on that is that we have been working, and a number of partners who are on this call have been working with the resort, and Snow Lake is going to be removed, which is for ecology and for the rivers and the streams and the biota is a very good thing. So over the next few years, it's not going to happen immediately, but the engineering is already in progress and getting done, where Snow Lake is going to be removed. The outlet of the lake is going to turn into a large structure. So there's aquatic organism passage, and a stream channel is going to be where the lake is now. So that temperature impairment over time will go away, which is great news.
So you will continue to monitor it because of all this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so I think we will go to Stephen.
Lovely, thank you. First of all, Maria, thank you for a very informative and clear presentation on the status of things. It's very helpful.
Thanks.
So thank you. In terms, I'm curious if Act 64, with all of the trenching by roads to reduce sediment going into water bodies, if that has been successful as expected, if it's done well, as it's an ongoing program that the towns and road crews still have to address. But I'm curious to know if you have feedback in terms of if it's accomplishing its aims. Thank you very much.
The answer to that is as from what we have determined so far, yes, it is doing what we hoped it would do. And this is all the road work that you see happening on the landscape, those big, ugly stone line ditches, which are doing a really good job of holding back sediment, slowing road runoff, keeping it. You'll see sediment basins at the bottom of the slope. And that is being successful, and it's one of the biggest things that we saw, particularly this summer, and I actually documented in a number of places, is those stone line ditches, where those were put into place and where the roads were properly graded to match that, the roads held up even in the July flooding storm, which was massive amounts of road erosion. But those rock line ditches held the roads in place. The roads that had them properly installed were not near as likely to wash out and gully on my particular road, which is it's a hill, it's got hill in the name. And, the side of the road that they did the ditching on held up perfectly. There was no erosion. The other side of the road, literally across the street from each other, the other side of the road was 18 to 2 feet deep gullies. So those are retaining, they are stopping roads from washing out and all that gravel from ending up in our waterways. We have gotten really good feedback from town road crews in that they don't have to go back after every storm and redo the road and build it back up and bring in more material, because the roads aren't losing all that material every time. So as far as water quality goes, we are looking at the nutrient reduction that comes from that, and those are being calculated, but we haven't gotten that far yet.
Right. No, thank you.
All signs are good.
Right. It's been a project that a lot of people have seen, but they don't necessarily know the results.
Yeah.
The
Sure.
consequences of some of the ditches is if you go off the road, it's pretty unpleasant. And so people see the negative, but I'm not sure that the positive has been well publicized.
That's a really good point, and we should do some, maybe I can include some of that in the basin plan. That's a really good idea. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
So Marie, we have several more questions coming up from the chat. Bob asks, are you including impacts of global warming in your analysis? Fire, drought, floods?
We are talking about climate change now in the plans, which is really good. Kind of looking at where things are going and what climate adaptations we can be making with our water resources to address that. And certainly a lot of that has to do with flood mitigation. I haven't had the need yet to get into the drought issues. But I see that coming as far as particularly for agricultural irrigation, which more and more farmers are needing, that we're going to have to address that. So Corey, if you could make a note of that, we should talk about that. I haven't done that yet, but we are definitely addressing it from the landscape services and of managing for climate change, managing for flood resiliency, and trying to keep water on the landscape in those times of drought. So how do we go about infiltrating more water, maintaining landscapes that aren't going to dry out as much? And I have included some of that in other plans, so I can make sure I bring those into this watershed as well.
So Linda and Steve ask, can you speak to the water quality problems that septic systems cause? They happen to see a lot of red areas in where they are in Guilford.
Again, those are models, so you know that's not ground truth data, but they're looking at where the development is, where the slopes are, what the soils are like in those areas, and what is most likely. What are the conditions that would lead to those septic issues? You know, septic runoff, you don't see very often a failed septic system, but obviously they do happen. The not maintaining septic systems, and most people who have them, a lot of people who have them don't know they actually need to be maintained and get pumped out on a regular basis. But those issues, that is certainly a bacteria issue, because the bacteria aren't getting treated if the septic system is not functioning properly. And those nutrient issues, phosphorus and nitrogen, are if the water is running out, not being properly treated by a septic system. Those are really the three main things: bacteria, pathogens, and nutrients reaching the groundwater system. And obviously groundwater moves, and if it's anywhere near a stream, that's usually downhill. So that groundwater ultimately reaches our streams and rivers and lakes, and brings those contaminants with it. So those are the things that we're concerned about and need to mitigate.
So Jim Henderson has some comments about stormwater master plan. So Jim, I'm going to ask you to come on. But before you speak, I just wanted to mention that, so in this basin, Brattleboro does have stormwater master planning. Wilmington is in the middle of having their stormwater master plan completed. And Dover just this month is on the wait list for getting a stormwater master plan done.
Thank you.
So Jim?
All right, thanks for giving me the update in Windham County. In Bennington County, we have 6 towns right now with adopted stormwater master plans. And currently there are 2 towns and 1 village that are being developed right now. And I can't overemphasize the importance of those stormwater master plans, especially when it comes to applying for grant applications. If you have a project in a stormwater master plan, theoretically, they will be uploaded to the Clean Water Projects database, and they're assigned a project number. And when you fill out a grant application, regardless of what type of grant it is, you have a project number to put in I can almost guarantee you, you will get that grant. I think we're probably, I'd go out on a limb and say we're 100%. When we apply for a grant that is identified in a stormwater master plan, the grant's in our pocket. So I'm glad that you're working on some right now in Basin 12. I can't, like I said, overemphasize the importance of them, and they're a really great tool for especially dealing with the road and stormwater issues. I also wanted to pick up on the comments about the stone line ditching. And I think it was Steve who had mentioned some of the perceived negatives and the misunderstandings about them. And as the environmental planner at BCRC, I work with all the road crews in Bennington County to do stormwater projects, especially implementing grant and aid projects. And inevitably, they almost all include a stone line ditch or upsizing a culvert. And I've heard many times from people saying, oh, the stone line ditch is now encroached on the road. If I were to drive off the road, I'd be in big trouble because the ditch is too deep. I have to agree wholeheartedly with what Marie said in regards to recent storm events. In every case where we had a storm that created significant road erosion, it was on areas or segments of roads that did not have an adequate ditch or was not stone lined, especially in July. All the road segments that had stone line ditches held up remarkably. And that's in the summer. The other thing that we've noticed is in the winter time, a stone line ditch, for whatever reason, perhaps it's because it drains the road bed better. We've noticed a significant decrease in the amount of mud and mud season that we've installed a stone line ditch. You don't get nearly as much of the significant mud season that we had prior to the ditch. So go for the stormwater master plans. They're really important, and that will take out a lot of this phosphorus and nitrogen that we have to deal with in this basin. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
So Norma has a question. Vernon has railroad beds that our brooks flow through, and they're reduced as they pass through what appears to be undersized culverts. What is your interest in upgrading these culverts?
I have a lot of interest in upgrading those culverts, but they are very difficult to work on. As a lot of people know, railroads have their own rules and regulations, and it is very difficult to work with those particular culverts, and a lot of them are these amazing stone formations. If you look at them, well, some of the railroad covers are the most incredibly beautiful culverts I've ever seen, but they are mostly undersized. And if there is any opportunity to work with the railroads on those, I'll be there working with them. And I have, in the years I've done this, I've tried to a couple of times, but have never succeeded unless there is an issue that's impacting the rail line that culvert is causing. I have not been successful in working with the railroad companies. I'll just say it that way. It's very difficult. So yes, if you have culverts that you know about, railroad culverts that are undersized and are causing issues, especially if they're backing water up and causing flooding behind the culverts, please let me know where those are, and I will see if there's a possibility to work on them.
So Aaron Rodgers had a comment about beaver habitats. Aaron, I don't know if you want to say something or if I should just read what you wrote. All right, I'm just going to read what she wrote, and I know this is a topic that is very near and dear. Oh, Aaron, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I was having trouble getting up, finding the mute button on my phone. Yeah, no, I mean, since Marie had said that she wants to hear both the good and the bad, just putting in my, advocating for having or for using beaver habitat as both a means of flood and drought resilience across the landscape. So encouraging that where we can, and maybe educating where there is beaver human conflict.
Thank you, Erin. Very good point.
So Norma has a question about stone line ditches. And she asks, don't stone line ditches reduce the opportunity for filtering water as it passes quickly?
Actually, it's just the opposite, because that roughness slows the water down, and all the spaces between those big rocks are where that, as it slows down, that sediment and road gravel can fall out. So it's both a velocity impact, because the water has to go bop up and down and slow down, and you'll often see small areas, we call them check dams, within the ditch, where the water has to back up a little bit and go over it. And that check dam also slows the water and allows that sediment to drop out. So that's why we use the stone line ditches, because it slows the water down, creates spaces between those rocks for sediment to settle into. They do take maintenance, right? Over time, those spaces are going to get filled up with sediment, and then, the rocks have to be removed, the sediment cleaned out, and the rocks put back. And you have to balance that amount of maintenance versus coming back to the road after every storm, and redoing the road and adding more material. So there are maintenance requirements with rock line ditches, but they're doing that sediment removal job.
I would like to add to what you said, Marie. The only real drawback that I've heard from just a couple of the towns that I work with in Bennington County is the maintenance aspect, and it's because they work and they need to be cleaned, and that is an issue that the towns are starting to address by buying really high powerful blowers that they can blow out sediment and leaves from. But they work so well that you're absolutely right. They have to be cleaned out and they have to be maintained. That's the only complaint I've heard from the road crews anyways.
Stephen, I noticed that your hand went up and then it went down. Did you have a question?
Marie answered it. The question was the maintenance, because the rock, the stone walls are going to fill with sediment. And but she cleared it up before I could ask. But the gentleman from Bennington County, I just had a curiosity question. If you blow out the leaves and the sediment, where is it going to go? Doesn't it get loosened up so that next rain it's going to go right down to the water or go back into the stones?
Well, they blow them into the woods, and the sediment in the leaves, they get blown out of the ditch off to the side of the road, and typically into a vegetated wooded area. Another way of maintaining them, a couple of our road crews have built screens, and they will literally with their backhoe fill a dump truck with the stone line ditch. They bring it back to the town garage. They screen the stone, and then they replace the stone after it's cleaned. And then they're left with a pile of sand and sediment that they either dispose of or they use in another project on their road that requires that type of very fine, almost silt-like material.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I just want to mention that we have hit the hour mark. So if some of you have to leave, feel free to jump off. We really do appreciate everybody coming and sharing ideas. Marie is still available and for questions, so I'm not trying to push anybody off. And but just giving people an opportunity if you need to leave to, and there is a chance if you go to the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation website and you look up Basin 12 Tactical Basin Plan, you will find a story map there that has a lot of the information that Marie presented this evening. That also has a survey. And so if you or people that you know who missed tonight want to still provide feedback, that survey is a great way to do it. You can also contact any of the water quality partners, and we can make sure that Marie gets that information too.
Thank you for mentioning that, Margot. I totally missed talking about that. Thank you.
And I noticed that Kathy from the Connecticut River Conservancy, she put a link to the story map right in the chat.
Great, thank you. And if you come up with other questions or concerns or comments, you can do it through the website. My email address is there. You can contact any of the partners, Margot, Corey, Kathy, Aaron, or Jim and other partners. They all know how to get hold of me. So please provide your input. It will only make this plan a better and more useful document. Anything else anyone would like to talk about?
All right, looks like we've don't have any further questions. So thank you all again for coming, and thank you for